Charting is a valuable feature of Excel. It allows you to communicate information in a highly visual way that will make your data really stand out. And so far, we've learned that Excel is a great tool for gathering data, analyzing it, and reporting it out to a broader audience. The charting capabilities are key elements of Excel's reporting and analysis. Charts are simply a way to graphically represent some interesting data you might have in your workbook. While you can always look at the numbers in the table and find the same facts, nothing is quite as compelling as a well thought out chart that displays the information in a way that makes the story you're trying to tell obvious and unavoidable. In this lesson, we're simply going to look at several of the charts that are available in Excel, and we'll see how different types of charts are better at communicating your message than others. In all, Excel has 11 chart families. From the Charts tab, let's look at the Insert Chart section. And you see here that we have many of the families that are available. We've got column charts, line charts, pie charts, bar charts, area, XY scatter plots, and if you look under other, there's even some more types: surface, donut, bubble, and radar. And you can see all the available charts that we have. And as you can see, each basic chart can have several variations. Let's look at the arrow next to the column drop down. And you see we have 2D column charts, 3D columns, cylinder, cone, pyramid. Just in the columns we have about 19 different subtypes of charts. Looking next to that, we have the line charts. And again, we have a regular line stacked, 100% stacked, line charts with different markers, and a 3D line chart. Then we could pop over to the pie chart and see that we have several different types of pie charts just as defaults. And you notice most of these include a 3D option as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Although we're going to look at several of these chart types, in our lesson we're going to focus on building column and pie charts. These are two of the most popular and useful charts in Excel, and many of the concepts we learn will apply to the other chart types. So hit the escape key if you're on the insert dialog box, and let's look at our table again. Zoom in a little bit. It has all the data elements that we need to report on. Sales by date and store. Well, how quickly can you tell me what store had the best sales over the 5-day period? How quickly can you tell me what day had the best sales? Although that information's in our data, even with the totals turned on, it can take a moment to determine where that information is on that table. Then there's usually the obligatory double check to make sure that you're looking at the table correctly and that you've counted everything the right way. Let's see what we can communicate with just a few simple charts. Starting out on the column 1 tab, this is a very basic column chart. The dates are points along the bottom row or axis of the chart, and the different stores are represented by colors. It should really jump off the page that our Manhattan store is doing much better than the other two. It's also showing the highest daily sales on 5909. You barely click on the chart and that information is staring you straight in the face. Now let's go over to column 2. This column chart tells a similar story. However, we've instead grouped the store as data points with the days of the week as our data series. In looking at this chart, we see pretty quickly that sales for all stores rise throughout the week and then drop off on Fridays. Information like this might be really effective in determining staffing levels or figuring out what days you might need to focus on to build business, maybe a Monday morning special. Chart 3 is a 3D representation of the first chart. While 3D charts can look really impressive in a workbook or a presentation, use them with care. Sometimes you have to do a lot of fine-tuning to a 3D chart to get it to look professional. Also, you have to take care if a chart is going to be printed. While a well-done 3D chart easily looks better than its 2D sibling on the screen or in a presentation, most 3D charts lose a lot of value when they're printed out. You definitely need to print out your 3D chart and see if it still tells the story you want it to. Next, we'll move on to the bar chart. In the bar chart, well, it's basically a sideways version of a column chart. To some degree, using a bar chart versus a column is personal preference. However, if you have many data points and are printing out in portrait, sometimes a bar chart will just make more effective use of the available space. Let's click on the pie chart next. Now this chart's fantastic for highlighting the distribution of values in your data. The only catch is it's only good for one series of data. If you notice, individual day sales are not on display here. Rather, it's just a graph of total sales per store. A line chart pretty much communicates what a column chart does. These are good though if you're tracking something over a long period of time. It's a little easier to get a feel for how your data is trending. And lastly, the radar chart. This is probably one of the most confusing charts we have available in Excel. Not only is this type a little difficult to comprehend, it can be difficult to get it to do what you want it to. In this chart, it initially looks a little obscure. Upon closer inspection, however, you can see that each spoke of the radar represents a store, and a data series will be plotted on these spokes. If you have the right sort of data and the right kind of story to tell, the radar chart can really help you communicate that. But for most cases, one of the more modest charts will suffice. Well, now that we've seen some basic chart types, let's look at some of the preset layouts. Let's navigate back to the column 1 chart. This chart communicates the information well enough, but there's some other ways we can configure this particular chart. From the Charts tab, go over and look at the Chart Quick Layouts. Click the arrow underneath this group to see all the layouts, and you see for this particular column chart we have about 11 different options there as well. These are all predefined layouts for the chart that we can apply to our column chart. Let's try a few of these. Click on the first chart icon in the drop down. See, this added grid lines at a very wide range along the y-axis. Now let's click the second chart in the group, and you notice too that the labels are gone. So now we can go right here, instead of clicking the drop down arrow, we can just click the second one right here. And that went back to the chart we had, except for the fact that it took the numbers off the y-axis. Sometimes those numbers don't matter if you're just looking for a trend or something. There's also a chart legend that's moved to the top. We've got Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. And it adds back in those data series labels so we know exactly what the number was at the top of each column. Well, now let's try the next layout. This one has a legend on the bottom and a chart title above the data. Click on the drop down for the chart layouts again. Choose the fifth one. This chart adds what's called a data table to our chart. A data table puts the values in each series at that point in the table so that we can see the discrete values if necessary. The last one thing I think is really sharp is the seventh chart. This chart adds minor grid lines to our plot area, but they're more subtle than the major grid lines and therefore they look much better. It just adds another level of detail to your chart. All the chart types have their own selection of quick layouts that will help you communicate your information to the user. Take a few minutes and explore some of the layout options for the rest of the charts. So to sum up, we've looked at several of the chart types in Excel. As you can see, there's many to choose from, and probably the most important first step is determining the story you're trying to tell before picking the appropriate chart. Each one has its own strengths and weaknesses depending on what you're trying to do.